What if becoming a better forager isn't just about learning more mushrooms, but learning to notice who else is interacting with them? Once you start paying attention to the animals around fungi, what's eating them, spreading them, damaging them, or depending on them, the forest starts to look completely different. Today we're diving into the book Animal Mycophiles by Eva Gordon, and why the subject can make you a sharper, more observant mushroom hunter. What if it wasn't just about having a secret spot for your best mushrooms, but having a roadmap to even better ones? And what if the difference between being merely curious about mushrooms or being really competent with them was just learning how to see differently? The MycoView helps you take that next step through thoughtful interviews, educational live streams, and carefully crafted content designed to help you think like a real mycologist. So wherever you are in your journey, there's always a next step. And the MycoView will be here to help you take it. Welcome to the MycoView, a channel for people who want to go deeper into fungi. Through thoughtful interviews, educational live streams, and carefully crafted content, the MycoView helps you sharpen your eye, deepen your understanding, and take the next step towards thinking like a real mycologist. My guest today wrote a book that I think every serious amateur mycologist should read. Not because it helps you key out species, but because it just might change how you interpret what you're seeing in the field. In her book, Animal Mycophiles, Eva Gordon dives into the relationships animals and other living things have with fungi, from rodents dispersing truffles to chimpanzees possibly using medicinal mushrooms. But what stood out to me is this. Once you start to understand these relationships, you can't walk through the woods the same way again. So let's get into it. So I'm going to tell you right now, reading this book, it was such a different book on mycology than I think I've ever read, because you either have these very academic books where you're learning a whole bunch and you can still get excited about some of the stuff they're talking about, but they can be dry and they can be, a little laborious to get through. And then you can, there are a handful of books that really are looking through mushrooms as this magical, mythical, amazing thing that you should reconsider, or you should consider for the first time. But I never had a book that was so completely grounded in an untapped and undiscussed realm of ecology, but at the same time, truly, in every word that you write, it was so obvious that you were completely inspired to write this book. Maybe
Thank you.
Just I want to hear a little bit about the things that were happening in your foraging experiences, your amateur mycological pursuits that got you from I didn't write this book to I just wrote this book and nobody else has written this book before.
Yeah, and not that there's there's plenty of research on mammals and mycology, but they're all scientific papers with data, graphs, and conclusions, and they're really interesting and all that. But I wanted to include people that don't necessarily have the time or background to go through and read these really, kind of hard to read scientific papers. So I kind of went through those. And but my background actually, I majored in zoology. So the animal part, the fauna never went away. It's always there, no matter where I go. Um, I'm looking for mushrooms, but I'm also looking for those little springtails or, those little maggots. So that's always there. And I started reading interesting scientific papers about, birds and mycology. There's actually a field called ornithomycology, something like that. And I'm going, but let me look for a book about this. So I went on Amazon. I'm looking. Wait, aren't there any books about animals and and fungi, because there's plenty with flora and fungi. They're everywhere, and I love those books. I read, The Mother Tree and all that, and so I was looking for that connection, and with my background as a science teacher, and you can't go into a high school class and give a really dry lecture. You'll be killed. You'll be just like, you can't do that. So you got to make science fun, goofy chemistry experiment, that sort of thing. So my attitude is, I'm going to write a book that even a high school kid will pick up and go, wow, this is interesting. I think I might major in that, or maybe I'll do a graduate work on, beetles and fungi or something like that. So, and also I've written novels, mostly fantasy and science fiction novels. So I have that creative side to my scientific side. So those two kind of melted, and I thought, well, I could write a nonfiction, what we call creative nonfiction. So it's, it appeals to a wider audience. So that's kind of where I was coming from.
You did that. You definitely did that.
I did that. Thank you.
Sometimes I like the really dense, heavy science, especially if I can keep up with it. But man, there's something really special when that creative juice can yield a killer metaphor and just make that understanding lock in, like make some complex dynamic in nature, some ecological dynamic just makes sense instantly. You're just doing that throughout the book. I really commend you on that.
Oh, thank you.
Your creative side was definitely serving the aim of the book for sure. So well done. So early in the book, you're kind of setting this tone where the simple way of thinking about fungi ecologically is that, oh, well, maybe they're sometimes a food source. Oh, here's a Ganoderma and there's some Japanese beetle eating on it. Or here's a mushroom and there's a snail chewing on it. And it's easy to just go, that's okay. So that's what they are. They're maybe a food source for some creatures. But pretty early on, you're going, no, they're not just that. They have an ecological role. They are ecologically driving changes in certain habitats and relationships with other animals. And throughout the book, you're showing this off. What was sort of your early understanding of how we were oversimplifying the ecological role of fungi?
Right. So the key to that is something called zukori, and it's when animals spread seeds, or in our case, it'll be spores. And basically, if you don't have that snail spreading the spores of your favorite edible mushroom, it's not going to move, right? It's going to stay in one place, and maybe that place will be destroyed. Like there's volcanoes, there's fires. So it's really important for animals to spread the spores if you want to continue going, that spot where you have your favorite edible mushrooms. So really important. And some mushrooms go crazy with this, like, like the ones that smell, the stink horns that smell really bad. The gleba attracts all those flies, and flies have spores all over them. They fly away, and then that helps that mushroom uh, become dispersed to other areas. And and I was learning about this. Even animals that don't eat mushrooms spread spores. By their very nature, landing on a spot where there's spores and then flying off like bats or birds. Um, People wonder, well, how did this mushroom end up all the way over here? Because a snail can't travel that fast and flies don't go that distance. But you have, creatures like birds and bats helping, as well as humans. I left humans out as one of the spore spreaders because I think people know.
So what did you call that? Because I didn't know how to pronounce it. Zukori, Zuokori?
Zukori, yeah. And in fact, I hired a narrator who does medical books and that sort of thing. I went through all these narrators, and she speaks Spanish and French and knows all the rules, the Latin rules. So I go, "You're hired." And she's the one who told, taught me how to pronounce a lot of these words like zukori. But yeah, that in itself is amazing. It's amazing how animals farm mushrooms. Um, but back to that relationship that we don't see. In the beginning of the book, I mentioned the mole latrines. I don't know if you remember that part. Um, but moles have a little latrine in their tunnel, and that's where they, go to the bathroom. And there's a mushroom, I think it's a hepaloma, and it will consume, uh, the excrement of a mole and the urine, and then pass on these nutrients to, all sorts of different mycorrhizal trees. So, what would happen if that mole was removed? Uh, would that mushroom disappear? Would the trees disappear? So, those are questions that we need to look at. If one relationship disappears, what happens to the rest of that habitat?
Questions that ecologists can't even hardly keep up with these days because of the changing environment, habitat destruction. Yes, crucial. I remember you talked about, I think it was they drilled a bunch of holes. It was about woodpeckers, and they drilled a bunch of holes, and they found that there was a different sort of battery of fungus that exists, bacteria and fungus that existed in the holes that the woodpeckers were pecking versus the ones that they never pecked. And I was just like, wow, we don't even remotely understand
We
all
don't
the little
know. Yeah.
ways. Yeah, that this
hmm
stuff is having an effect on, God, where did the woodpecker pick a certain tree as a favored species, maybe because there was a certain fungus there, and so as it's moving
hmm
around, it's only making its job easier because the fungus gets in
Right.
there. And yeah, who I
Yeah.
was just like, wow, this is fascinating.
It is. I went through a yeah, I guess a black hole or whatever it is. Oh, rabbit hole. That's the word. Yeah, every single animal I read about and its relationship, I just went into a deep rabbit hole, and I had to stop. I mean, one of the problems with research, it's so much fun that um, if you don't stop, you'll never write the book. So, but
Uh, yeah, every paper's a PhD, and so you're just sitting there going, wow. I'm just getting a touch of each little thing, but if you're like me, it's all interesting, and yep, you end up down all the rabbit holes for sure.
yeah,
I'm
right.
a rabbit hole aficionado for sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
In chapter 9, you get into truffles, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't mind some sliced truffle on some food from time to time. I have not gotten super into the truffle mania, and some people definitely got the mania going on. But in chapter 9, you're getting in depth on truffles, and what animals are interested in finding these truffles, what they're doing with them, and how they're playing a role in kind of engineering or re-engineering forests. So you're painting this picture of, okay, so these truffles are appealing to certain animals. They're eating them. They're doing this and that and the other thing with them. Um, it got me to thinking. Okay, as a general rule, I don't think I spend too much time thinking about what mammals are consuming mushrooms in the wild. Maybe I'll see, every once in a while some nibbles on a Pluteus or something like that and think, okay, cool, some little animal chewed that up. But I really don't spend a lot of time thinking about that relationship. So let's talk a little bit about that. How how should I be thinking about that? What are the interesting ways that mammals wandering around the woods are doing important things through their relationship with fungus?
Again, it's that concept of zukori. For example, the wild boars, they love truffles, and they'll come into your yard, destroy your yard, get all the truffles, right? and people are very angry, but at the same time, they're also helping the spores disperse. So there's always going to be healthy truffles, maybe not in your yard, because maybe your yard burns or is polluted, and maybe in another yard. So, and it seems this is interesting because the evolution seems to drive this because truffles smell really good, especially a female pig, a sow, because it releases this androgen sort of odor, which the pig really enjoys and looks for. And even humans, we like that sort of garlicky taste. So we're going to consume them. So it seems like evolution has driven truffles to taste really good to mammals, especially because mammals do dig. So if you're going to live underground, how are you going to get your spores out?
You gotta get some help.
You got to get some help, yeah. And I like how we outsource truffle hunting to our dogs because the dogs have this incredible, sense of smell. So that's helped us, and we train our dogs, and our dogs find scent, and then we start, I guess, raking or something. So, but yeah, it's really interesting, and um, parts. I think it's especially in Australia, or is it South America? Well, birds are attracted to color, and so the truffles that are eaten by birds tend to be a little bit brighter, like bluish and that sort of thing. So that's kind of interesting. That it's almost like the truffles saying, "I'm going to make myself look colorful so that birds eat me and spread the spores." So and so that's just random millions of years of evolution of this going on.
Yeah, the color thing is fascinating because when you're wandering around the woods, sometimes you're just marveling at how well camouflaged the mushroom is, how well it blends into other things. Like many mushrooms look just like seed pods that are dropping at that time of year, or they blend in with the leaf litter exceptionally well. But then other times you're like, what is this mushroom doing? It is purposely trying to stand out. Um, why is it doing that? Yeah. So it's interesting to think that that might not just be random colors, chemicals that are driving some of those colors, but like the evolution of it might have made those genes succeed because they were more appealing to other animals for the
Right.
zukori. Yes. All right.
Zukori.
I'm, I'm getting it. Zukori. I love it.
Zokari, yeah.
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 Spread the spores. That
Spread the
I
spores,
love it.
spread the word.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the other thing that got me to thinking about though is I have never, ever, ever documented this kind of information. If I find a damaged mushroom and it looks like it's been eaten by a slug or a bug or an animal, I typically, it's almost like I don't favor that. I'm finding, let's say I find 5 of the same species, I sort of ignore that one. And your book had me thinking, well, maybe that's a mistake. Maybe I need to take a photograph of that one and document, this one looks like it was eaten by an animal with a mouth of about this size. And yeah, that might be good information to start including in my observations.
Yeah, those are photographs I'm looking for. I'm looking for photographs to differentiate rodent nibbling versus deer nibbling versus other animal nibbling. The snail one's pretty obvious because the snail tongue-like structure, the radula, kind of rakes in there, so you can tell it's a snail that's been eating it. So,
And half the time
yeah,
it's still there. Yeah.
yeah, it's still there.
A
Yeah,
lot of times it's
especially
still there. Yes.
on your favorite chanterelle. Oh
Exactly.
no,
Or
right?
underneath my boletes. Yep. Exactly.
Oh no. Yeah.
Yeah, so I like that. I thought that was just definitely a missing piece, the documenting that, or nearby scat, or is this mushroom that I have evidence that it's being eaten was it just off a game trail? Like just little clues like that, where adding that information instead of ignoring it, because I'm not gonna lie, the desire to just take a gorgeous photo of the perfect mushroom specimen is strong, right? You want that perfect example. And yet by doing that, if I am excluding mushrooms that are giving me evidence of ecological relationships and all that kind of stuff, I'm doing a disservice to that observation. So reading the book, I was like, okay, I got to up my game. This is definitely important.
Yeah, in fact, I take a lot of pictures of animals nibbling mushrooms on the net for iNaturalist, and it probably doesn't get that attention because it's not the most beautiful picture. It's got a lot of bites. So,
But I mean, so here's the great thing, at least this is my opinion about the great thing about iNaturalist is so you add all that information, it's there forever. So maybe this week no one cares, but next week somebody might care, or in 2 years your observation might give them a clue that validates a hypothesis that leads to their thesis, in grad school or something. So yeah, I still think that it's a really cool thing to utilize iNaturalist. Then I can refer back to it, right? So if the next year I'm seeing something, I can go, wait, didn't I see that last year? And I can go back and look at my observation. Oh, yeah, I made a note about that. Oh, yeah. So now I got the strong evidence that there's a small mammal in this little section of woods that's consistently eating this certain species. It's a cool thing to figure out. You had a section, Tipsy Tales, which was definitely an interesting section. You start talking about yeast and fermentation in the wild and the ways that these fungal yeasts are affecting animal behavior. Okay, guess we got a lot to thank fungi for, right? We're the fermentation is doing a lot of great things for us in humanity, but we don't think about what it might be doing for animals and in their relationship with it. So do you think that this was sort of there, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on this. This chemical influence for any animals or living things that are consuming these mushrooms, did you in your research get a sense that there's sort of a hidden thread that's running through all these animal fungal relationships? That maybe there might always be some sort of altered mental status, some perception changes, and what did you notice with those relationships?
yeah, it's really interesting because when I was reading about, there's a lot on psilocybin in animals, especially big mammals. Um, but then I noticed that animals like cedar waxwings fall dead from drunkenness, and I'm like, no one's paying attention to all these drunk animals. you know, yes, they have, you know, um, dry flying under the influence. But so that to me is really interesting because the evolution of it. I mean, fungi that produce a lot of, you know, alcohol in the fermentation process, that's a lot of calories. So that's very interesting to animals to consume food that's high in sugar for survival. But at the same time, it's dangerous for them because if they get drunk, then all sorts of things can happen. They could fly into a window or uh, fall down, and the cat will eat them. So it's really interesting, that aspect. And there's even a little critter that has built up um, his an ability to not get as drunk from these highly fermented fruits. So because that energy is so important, and but it gets animals in trouble if they're not careful. If a drunk bee tries to get into the hive, the other bees will kill it, which is kind of a harsh way to treat someone who's flying under the influence. Yeah, yeah. If a drunk bee tries to enter the hive, the other bees will usually kill it. So, because, it's like it happens, like if your drunk uncle comes to your house during Thanksgiving and starts acting stupid, you
Kick
escort
them
him
out.
out, right?
I don't murder
Yeah.
them, but yes, I do kick them out. Yes,
Yeah.
or I
Get
tell them
out.
to go to an AA meeting. Maybe that's what we need. Alcoholics Anonymous for animals.
For animals. Yeah. I
and,
think
and
that's
insects.
that's a really good cause.
But
The
that
12-step program.
That whole thing, like when you said that running into a window, I'm thinking like as a child, all the times where a bird just, killed itself by flying into a window. And now I'm like, wow, were those all the drunkard birds that were just flying into the windows? Who knows? But that whole realm of the fermentation process, alcoholic animals, it's fascinating though that it can cause them so many problems. And yet, from what I was reading, they seem to like it. Like, is it that they like it, or that they just don't? They need the food and the calories so much they're just not really differentiating between.
Yeah, it's hard to say because I mean, I think animals have a consciousness. A lot of people go, no, they're just like little robots. They don't care. They're just going to feed. But yeah, I think it's the sugar content, the energy is really appealing to these animals. But I think it must be appealing to eat a fruit and feel kind of relaxed. I think just like your glass of wine, right? So, um, yeah, but it's hard to say. I mean, uh, we don't want to anthropomorphize animals, but at the same time, you can't deny that, your dog enjoys, certain things beyond just food, right? So, yeah, it's really interesting.
It's an interesting thought of you're framing the are other things conscious? Do they have a consciousness? And but then you're also going, well, okay, so we have evidence that these easily simplified organisms, oh, they're not conscious. They don't have midlife crises and all that kind of stuff. But yet you're there is plenty of evidence to suggest that they enjoy consuming these things for the feeling that they're getting, just like we do. And so in that way, we're similar. They're like us, we're like them, whichever you want to call it.
Yeah. Because if you give your dog, something to relax it, CBD or something, you notice a difference, right? Of course, dogs are can't compare dogs to bees, but
True. Yes. But yeah, all that the behavior. It's interesting to start looking at some of that behavior, especially the fungal mammal relationships. The other reasons beyond food that they might be eating or interested in these little mushrooms that we love. Um, so what about the idea that is there any evidence that you found to suggest that there was an advantage to, let's say, a cheetah eats a certain magic mushroom in the Serengeti or wherever the heck it's at, and because of
it
that,
will slow down. No.
well, okay, so you sort of answered my question, but I was just wondering, is there a case where being altered gives that animal an advantage?
It's hard to make observations on that sort of behavior, because if animals start getting drunk or high, they're a lot more vulnerable to predation or, just getting stepped on. So I don't know if that's an advantage. Like, obviously, we see psilocybin as an advantage if you have PTSD or something that really helps. But in that situation, you're in the group or what have you, and someone's watching you and protecting you. You're not going to take psilocybin and then go near the freeway, for example. Yeah, so
You better not. That
you
would be
better
bad.
not.
Yes.
So, and that's probably true. Like the reindeer. I mean, if they're consuming a lot of what is it, muscimol or what have you, and they're not going to pay attention to their calves as much, maybe, or that grizzly bear might be, or the bear might be watching you. You're kind of stumbling around.
So I like that. Let's get these bears high or tripping on something so I don't have to worry about them.
I
I can
know.
wander
Yeah, you
around
have
the
to work.
woods. Oh, hey, what's up, bear? And he's just, I look like five trees to him. No, no big deal.
Yeah, imagine if you can carry a bear spray that makes them high instantly, and so they don't care about eating
Eva,
you.
don't give away these free capitalistic gems. That's who's going to do that. That's psychedelic bear spray is next summer. We're going to launch it. Okay. All right, so let's move on. I definitely I don't have a lot of guests on about this, but I think it's fascinating, and every time I get to read a paper about this, I'm just like, how is there not 1,000 more papers about this? Which is the pharmacology of literally everything, every ecological interaction, and particularly for fungus, which all they do, their whole job is just to excrete and digest things, through little enzymatic reactions, and the way they break down so much organic matter. We still don't know that much about all that stuff. So I find that fascinating, and you get into that in the book. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things you found out in your research about mammals that are seeking out fungus, mushrooms for medicinal reasons.
Yeah, I ran across a paper by I forget his first name, Dr. Patterson in South Africa. He studies forest elephants, and he talked about how they consume Ganoderma apladnum, the artist conch, and that seems to help prevent diseases. It helps their immune system, and he studied their dung, and sure enough, there was a lot of Ganoderma in their dung. So he wrote about that. I emailed him, and he wrote back, "Yeah, there's a lot of evidence that it helps their immunity," and animals seem to know this. And Dr. Diane Fossey, who studied gorillas, also noticed that the, the gorillas would eat Ganoderma and other mushrooms for no reason. I mean, because, Ganoderma is hard as a rock, Yeah, that's not going to taste good. Even if I had the teeth, I'm not going to, consume it like that. So it's kind of interesting. And they've also been looking at sloths. I mean, researchers, because sloths have their own little rainforest system. They have bacteria, they have fungi growing on their fur, and they seem to be immune to a lot of tropical diseases, like the fungi that they carry make them immune to Chagas disease, malaria, and other diseases that harm humans. So I'm thinking, if they could take that, look at a sloth, and investigate, which fungi are preventing them from getting Chagas disease, then we have, uh, a whole pharmacy there to help humans. So that's really interesting. Plus, I like the fact that baby moths, the larvae of the moth that grows on the feces of the sloth, kind of like bursts out from their poop.
Wait, what? I don't know if I remember this.
I don't know if did. I even sometimes I do substacks on different animals. I think the sloth is mentioned here.
The sloth was, I don't know if I recall the moth part.
Probably not the moth part because it's not related to the fungi.
There's just moths that just are birthed out of sloth poop.
Yeah.
Another cool thing about sloths.
A lot of people have a bucket list. I have a basket list, and one of them is to observe moths erupting from sloth poop.
Okay, hashtag you are the only one, but I might add that one too.
And I just, I mean, there's so much more. That's why I'm going to start a I have a Substack, and my hope is to add more animals that are not in this book because there's so much more. I'm right now I'm obsessed with owl pellets and the fungi that decompose the bones in the owl pellets. That's something I'm obsessing with. Everybody has different obsessions. That's one of them.
All right, in I think this was like the last chapter, you were talking about Jason Slott's work on psilocybin and how he's suggesting it might be an insect defense strategy for the fungus, for the mushrooms. Um, what in reading about that, what gears were turning in your head as far as some sort of all the little ways that we maybe we've simplified our ecological understanding on things. Um, just have we taken the easy road on some of these? Oh, well, all that really is just this or just that, instead of going, oh, it could be more subtle, it could be more nuanced. Um, I thought really like, but insects, I would have never thought it was about defense against insects.
Yeah, I think they're not 100% sure. I think more studies need to be done about that because, why is this chemical so popular in the mushroom world, psilocybin? Um, so it could be just like trees, trees release these toxins to prevent insects from eating them. So it's really easy for me to think that, well, mushrooms do like to be eaten, so their spores can spread. But so it kind of contradicts that, right? If you're going to have an insect eat you to spread the spores, that's a good thing. But why would you want to prevent insects from eating you? That's that's the question that kind of confused me. And so I'm not sure what the answer is. It's easy to say, yeah, it's to keep insects away. Maybe it's to keep certain insects away. Maybe it'd rather have a snail eat it or something else eat it. So it might differentiate between the type of animal that, uh, I don't think there's any studies of other invertebrates that can, eat psilocybin and, get away with it, not be turned off. But yeah, so that's a really good question. I think, that we need to pursue that.
I never even thought about okay, so it's like if somebody proposes an answer to one question, it's always going to generate another question. Okay, well, but why would it want to keep insects away? Especially if we have other documentation of, oh, well, bugs and slugs and all that, they're helping in spore dispersal. And if all this thing is just the fruiting body, just the flower, and it's just like a flower and bees with pollen, right? The whole point is to disperse pollen or spores or whatever. Why would it want to prevent a certain insect or something? Could it be in favor of something else getting at it? Like maybe the bugs and slugs get at it too soon. And yeah, it's hoping something else will. But man, the ecological drivers of that are would be pretty hard to figure out.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. And maybe it's not even used to repel insects. Maybe there's another biological function that we're not aware of yet. Yeah, I mean, you don't know. Maybe it helps them survive in difficult soil or colder weather. You don't know for sure. Yeah. Might have been just a random mutation for no reason. Yeah.
I mean, for all we know, LSD could be a wonderful detergent in our dishwashers, but
Oh, I'm sure it is.
we don't know that if we don't test it
Yeah.
out. Yeah. In all your research, what are things that you feel like if you were funding a bunch of scientists right now to do research in this vein, what are the big things you think science is not looking at that you found to be the most compelling, the most fascinating? Where would you start tossing money for research projects first?
Let's see. Habitat restoration for sure. Making sure that the plant, the fungi, the animals, and bacteria and other microorganisms are doing what they're supposed to be doing. There's also the whole idea of fungi in the ocean, in the marine environment, that's going to be another book because there's so much we don't know. And like people go, well, it's great that these mushrooms are breaking down plastic, plastic, but do they break them down to the microplastic level where you still consume more of them? Or do they consume even the microplastics until they're gone? So there's so many studies. Um, I like the idea of studying, paleontology by looking at coprolites, the poop of ancient mammals and dinosaurs, and trying to figure out what the fungal life was like then, and then you could get a better picture of evolution. So I would probably fund that a lot, to seriously look at, because then maybe you'll start getting connections between the fungi and the ants and all that. I mean, how did that start? How did the leafcutter ants get started with farming? And there's one critter I didn't put in my book that is starting this. It's a little littorina, little snail that lives in uh, saltgrass back east, and it's spreading spores on this leaf and then coming back and consuming that leaf. So it seems to me like that's the start of farming. So maybe in 20 million years, you'll have snail farmers. So a little research on who else is farming mushrooms besides beetles and ants and termites. There's so much. Um, yeah, I need billions of dollars because I want to fund everything.
But I like this idea of, the not just remediating, oil spills and things like that. But okay, so fine, if we have a human population that's so huge and so overgrown, we can't just stop feeding people and have mass famine and go, well, there should only be 1 billion human beings on Earth, so let's just kill off 7 billion of them. We can't do that. But what we can do is go, well, how do we harvest timber more ethically? How do we rejuvenate then those soils and the soil chemistry that changes so radically when you do clear cut? There definitely some things we could start looking at. That goes beyond, you have to identify the thing. So if there's some mysterious fungus out there that's just going to change humanity, in ways we can't even imagine, you do have to identify it first, for sure. You got to do the alpha taxonomy on it. But it's the biochemistry, it's the ecology that then makes that science more useful. So I love the idea of we gotta collect more information. We gotta give people inspiration to do some of that work.
Yeah, that's why I think part of the reason I love fungi, is because I'm a futurist. I think with remediation and helping carbon sinks with the use of mushrooms, I think that's going to save us. So just like Paul Stamets says, that's so I that gives me hope for the future.
We're human beings. We wanna just consume everything and reproduce like crazy and do all the bad things human beings do, but we are clever. We figured some cool tricks out, and it would be really cool if we could come up with the ways, if at the end of the day, all these problems we created on Earth, if ultimately they inspired us to solve all those problems and then have a better sort of future of how do we exist and how do we keep our Earth healthy, that would be great.
Yeah, that's why I think it's really important for mushroom farmers to get the word out because you won't starve to death if you know how to grow mushrooms, right? So that's just one way, because people, during the apocalypse, they have to start their own gardens or go hunting. But if you can have your own supply of oyster mushrooms, it's possible that, you won't die of starvation.
Yeah, how many people just don't even realize mushrooms are a great protein source? Lots of people outside of our little clique, they don't understand it. Yeah, or I just read a thing, I didn't know this, about if even if you just go buy some button mushrooms from the store and not canned ones, fresh ones, but you set that little pint of button mushrooms out on the windowsill, it actually will continue to develop and produce more vitamin D at a rapid rate, and you then have this huge source of vitamin D just from setting it out in the sun for a little while.
That's interesting. I'm gonna start doing that.
Yeah. Oh, I read it and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna totally start setting my mushrooms out in the sun. Yeah. But man, just saying that to you now just had me going, okay, so there's a whole nother layer of why some of these animals could be consuming the mushroom. Sure, for nutrition, but maybe nutrition in ways we're not fully comprehending. Maybe there's more to what they're eating, why they're eating it, when they're eating it.
Like Chernobyl. I mean, why has wildlife grown in Chernobyl? Like this huge wolf population, deer population. Is somebody eating mushrooms that have broken down the you know, nuclear toxic waste?
But you brought up something that I had thought about when they first started talking about these the fungal strains that were breaking down plastics. I thought, well, is that good? Is it like if we're breaking it down to microplastics, I feel like that might be worse than just having like a plastic toy bucket buried in the ground somewhere and have it take 3,000 years to break down. That might be better than breaking down those microplastics. So, like you said, we might have to train one species, might break it down on one level, another species might break it down more, but we definitely can't just assume that what that's doing right now is anything more than sort of a novel anecdote to, some future research. I'm not trying to make it worse. The microplastics, man, every article I read is just scarier and scarier about them.
That's why I switched to not ever using like water bottles.
Metal thermoses for sure. Yeah, or glass. We try to do the yogurt in the glass instead of a plastic container. And if we get takeout, I do not. I used to microwave it in the plastic. I don't do that anymore because now I know that was like the worst thing I could have done.
Yeah, because I have a dark side. I was thinking of writing a science fiction about, releasing this of fungus that eats all the plastic in the world. But then we need plastic too. I mean, for surgery and medical supplies.
Ooh, that is a good premise.
Yeah, I mean, our glasses, our computers. It's like,
Plastic is amazing, but it's like every invention mankind has ever had. There's no such thing as an invention that is only good. Fire's amazing. Where would we be without fire? Not here, but also fire can burn my house down.
like windmills. I love the idea of energy from the wind, but the kill ratio of all the birds and bats that are
Oh, I didn't
killed
even
by
know
windmills.
this.
Oh yeah, that's a big problem, especially bats,
So
because
those,
bats eat mosquitoes.
yeah, they're important. Yes,
Yeah,
what I didn't know. So the
yeah.
Dutch hate bats. I did not know that. Okay.
But see, it was created for good, though. So you create something for good, and there's a dark side.
Yep. That is what we do, human beings, our intelligence. If we can figure out something good to do with something, we can figure out something bad to do with it. Man, but that is just 100% why everybody needs to get out in the woods more, think more, observe more. Your book definitely. I love anything that gets me to see the world more completely, and I think the more time we spend doing that and thinking through our problems and thinking through all this new technology, how can iNaturalist? How can we use it to our advantage? Um, should I? I don't have any time to read a book, so okay, so I'm going to start doing some books on tape. Anything we can do to keep that mind going and not just doom scrolling all day.
I know. I'm trying to weed myself. I promised myself to only spend 5 minutes on social media, and most of it is, promote my book and that sort of thing. But I'm trying to stay away. It's hard, and I'm a full adult. Can you imagine what it does to a 12-year-old?
That's why I say to my wife, we grew up without it. I mean, I didn't even have a TV till I was in third grade, I think it was. And then even then it was a 13-inch black and white. I had the antenna and the foil and all that. And I wasn't, as a kid, I hardly ever watched TV, maybe in the morning before I went to school a little bit.
I just remember, coming home late at night after being in the orchard or the creek with my friends, and nobody worried about that. But, and then plus there's the problem of AI and people using that to identify mushrooms. And I keep on telling people go out with a club with an expert. Um, so it's kind of sad.
I want to have just never ending compassion for these people who are making these really poor decisions. Um, but I think it ends up being sort of a sign along the highway that should be telling our society it is about to get dangerous. We have to learn how to think critically again. I mean, I can, but not everybody can. I know you can, but not everybody can. We have to start valuing critical thinking over, just reposting something that somebody posted, or, oh, I read half an article and now I'm just going to blab that in somebody's face, but not really think about it. These people are taking a tiny bit of information, and running with it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good warning. That's a red flag when people are dying because Google tells them it's an edible mushroom when it's not.
Yeah, when entire families, and wow, you're gonna trust an AI? Do you even know how it works? Do you know how a large language model works? Do you know what input data it had? Do you like you are making so many assumptions and instantly placing so much trust into it. It's like everybody just wants an oracle, the magic 8 ball to tell them what to do all the time. But your book doesn't do that. Your book
No.
makes me go, shit, I don't know anything about this stuff. I didn't think about any of these subtle little things that I'm not only ignoring, but sometimes I'm, purposely excluding from my iNaturalist observations.
Yeah, that's why I end with Horton Hears a Who, because you don't know what's underneath that moss, right? There's a whole world going on. Uh, and it's a lot more important than going on social media, I think. Looking for tardigrades and moss, it's like it's so much more fun if you really, you know, it's just as entertaining as being triggered by whatever's on social media.
I think here's the other compliment I want to give you is it's obvious through your writing style in the book that there is a reverence for the things that you studied. I think we're probably similar in this way. For me, the more I understand nature and its majesty, its marvelousness, the more I feel connected to, whatever you want to call it, God, the higher power, the cosmic mother, the sentient beings, whatever you want to call it, that thing that we don't see, that is just running through all the stuff, that every time I learn a little bit more, I have a deeper reverence for it. I don't take it for granted. And
Right.
yeah, in that way, like seeing a tardigrade and some moss, is that more important than seeing some stupid, eye-catching TikTok? For me, it is, because now every little patch of moss I walk by, I already know what's going on in there. And so I don't just dismiss it. I've gained reverence for it. And
Exactly.
when you said that, it made me realize all the adjectives, all the colorful language, all the metaphors are in your book are a way that you're showing how it impacted you to
Yeah.
learn about it. So I
Yeah.
think that's really great.
Yeah. It's kind of like a mystical experience, you know. It's like I'm getting high on on looking at these critters out there. And it's so important to get kids out there. schools. That's why I'm also on the education committee for NAMA, and we're trying to make, October 15th is the mushroom day, but we kind of want to get more schools involved, just like pie and mold day. We want to get more schools involved so that kids can go out there and look through the moss and all that and look for mushrooms and see these connections. So that's our goal as the education committee, is to somehow get the kids away from their phones. There's so much more beauty out there beyond the screen.
Yes, yes, yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm going to shout out to Green Writers Press. They do a lot of books focused on nature and the environment. So,
all right, we'll put links.
You want to check out more nature books?
Yeah, we'll put a link in the description to them, to your Substack, where people can go buy your book. Just so people can have a way to connect with you. And you told me earlier you had just moved up to the Pacific Northwest, and I'm assuming enjoying it up there.
Oh yeah, it's fun. And fortunately, we don't have snow this year, which is it's kind of a warm winter, so we're still seeing some mushrooms.
I really appreciate you coming on. We're going to make sure everybody who had a good time and want to check out the book have a way to do it. It'll all be in the description below. Maybe we'll have you back on again when you get that aquatic fungi book written, or the Substack
even Substacks. Yeah, I'm going to have my next Substack is going to be on the mole latrine, and then owls, and so owls and owl pellets and mushrooms. So
you had me at owls. I love me some.
Yeah, I love owls. Yes. They're like my avian mushroom, because they're weird. I think we both like things that are a little bit weird. So
yeah, mushroom people are. Yeah, we're a little weird. We're interestingly weird. Yes.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. So let me know if you got a cool Substack coming out. You can always send me a message, and we can do a quick little segment on it. Definitely want to keep people in the loop on everything that's going on.
Oh yeah, especially with your new MycoView.
Yeah, MycoView. That's what we're doing here. We're getting, we're just trying to keep it. I started off in the cultivation space, and now we're just trying to, as my interests have broadened, it was finally time to have a channel dedicated to the non-cultivation side of things. So that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much. We'll talk again soon. After this conversation, I think it becomes a lot harder to see a mushroom as just an ID target. You start seeing relationships, ecology, and evidence, and that can genuinely make you a better forager and amateur mycologist. Huge thanks to Eva Gordon for joining me in this interview. So, wherever you are in your journey, there's always a next step. MycoView's here to help you take it.